So what do blood, pinkies, and flowers and the Bible all have in common? It's anime. Anime mentions all of these things. Today we're going to talk about the biggest symbols often mentioned in our favorite anime. So grab your cup because it's time to spill the anime tea. Ooh, my hair got caught in the tea. Before we dive into these symbols, we need to first dive into the meaning behind a symbol. What is a symbol? So get your glasses because I'm about to teach you some anime literature analysis. According to a quick Google search, symbols are basically imagery that indirectly expresses mystical ideas, emotions, and concepts. They're often found in literature, but can also be found in other places such as like advertisements and marketing and anime. But let's talk about actual symbols now. The first one is the red string of fate. The red string of fate is a pretty popular symbol. You may have seen, this red thread that's like tied around some of the characters, usually around their pinkies, but also just like kind of in the air or surrounding a character or a couple of characters together or linking the character somehow. And that is known as the red string of fate. It is an old Eastern folktale that has been passed down for like a really long time, across multiple cultures as well. Yeah, in Japan, according to Wikipedia, the folktale has something to do with the thread being bound by the woman's pinky and the male's thumb for couples who are said to be bound together, for life and in the past lives and in future lives. But when you see a lot of anime, it's usually both pinkies tied together, and that probably has something to do, with aesthetics. I guess it's just nicer to see two pinkies tied together than it is a thumb and a pinky. I guess the pinkies aren't too weird because, in the Western culture, we have pinky promises where people, cross their pinkies together. And it also is said to have something to do with an artery that's in your pinky that connects to your heart. So it's like your heart finger. Your pinky's your heart finger, so protect that. Red string is supposed to symbolize just the unbreakable bond between normally two people, but not always two people. It could be multiple people. There's many different tales that talk about, romantic connections of people who are connected over time and space and lifetimes and circumstances and ages and all kinds of things. But there's also, the most common romantic connections. It's often shown by a red string, a red thread that connects the two, which is said to be unbreakable. It can twist and turn and bind, but it will never break. Let's talk about a really notable anime that most recently the symbol has shown up in. The 2016 movie Your Name features the red string very, very heavily. The main two characters, Mizuha and Taki, are tied together by this, but not literally tied together. It's illustrated more loosely around them than actually tying them together, but the red string that is shown actually does tie up Mizuha's hair, and there's a point in the movie where she kind of throws out the string to Taki and connecting them, binding them together through fate and other things and circumstances and things that I cannot say because it will spoil the movie greatly. And I honestly believe that Your Name is a great movie, and I do not ever want to spoil it for anyone. But again, the red string ties back to fate, to promises, and often to romantic connections like you see in Your Name, and often just referenced as like a trope or like a common thing in lots of other anime. Even in Yu Yu Hakusho, there's an example. And yeah, speaking of things that are red and bind people, the next thing on this list is blood. And I know you're thinking like, Phoenix, how can blood be a symbol? That's not a symbol of Phoenix. You know what a symbol is. You just explained it at the beginning of the video. And I'm like, I know, I get it. But in anime, it is, trust me. Because there are several different mentions / versions / showings of blood in different ways in anime. One, bloodlines meaning like connections of family members like throughout time, throughout generations. And this is also really huge in like ninja anime. So specifically, I'm going to talk about Naruto because, Naruto, each of the clans have like their certain bloodlines and they get certain powers because of those bloodlines. With the Uchiha clan, with, Sasuke and Itachi, they have specific blood and they have specific powers because of their blood. There's also a newer anime that came out called Joran, Princess of Blood and Snow, and there's a whole like revenge story based off of like her family's blood and stuff like that. So lots of like kind of ninja revenge darker stories are based around that. I think even Demon Slayer touches on it a little bit with like the bloodline with Tanjiro and his father, and you know, their demon slaying capabilities and all that. Blood types, which are more specific to Japanese culture, because blood types are used to kind of determine someone's personality. It's kind of like a horoscope, but for blood. And it's really big in Japan, and you might have seen it in those like in-between screen cards that pop up on My Hero Academia specifically, where it talks about like what the characters like and what they like to do, and you know, what they like to eat, and then at the bottom you see their blood type, and you're just like, whoa, what does that have to do with anything? And that's because it means something about their personality. Anyway, let's talk about something a little less violent and bloody and talk about flowers. I love flowers. Flowers are amazing, and anime loves flowers too. There's actually an entire language just for flowers called flower language, or hanakotoba. Please excuse me if I pronounce that wrong, because you know, my Japanese is very it's rusty, so yeah, but I'm gonna do my best. So I think it's called hanakotoba. So basically, hanakotoba is the language of flowers. It means that certain flowers have certain meanings, and if you give someone a certain flower, that it usually has some kind of meaning behind it. And anime likes to use flowers a lot. There's usually some flowers in like the forefront, taking up most of the screen, or like maybe one single flower of a specific kind and species that takes up the screen and then goes on into like the rest of the story, or it's surrounding the characters, or it's surrounding the story, or it's usually coming up, or it has its own scene by itself. There's so many examples of flowers in anime. I think an anime that does a good job of showing it, that's a little bit more recent, is Wonder Egg Priority. Wonder Egg Priority does a great job of just showing lots of different kinds of flowers and kind of alluding to their meanings based off context of other things around them. One of the most major ones is the white lily, or yuri. This flower is usually associated with death. When we see Ai walking into the dream egg world for the first time, and like going through the door where she's about to see her best friend, there is a bunch of white lilies all over the floor, and there's also a time when there's a white lily like in the foreground, and you know, things with death and all the things that go on in Wonder Egg Priority, which is a whole lot, which is why I made a whole other video about that. Please go watch that later after this one, because also in Wonder Egg Priority they show the sunflower a lot, and sunflowers are known as himawari, and that also means joy. They also like portray joy and just like brightness and beautifulness and the sun and everything great. And specifically Wonder Egg Priority, it has like this double meaning of like portraying yourself as something beautiful and like amazing, and you're just fine, when on the inside, you know, things are not just fine. Like there's just many deeper meanings in each of these little details of flowers that you may have not noticed before, but can tell you a lot more about a character in a show than you may have realized. And speaking of flowers, we cannot mention flowers and flower language, all that, without mentioning the biggest flower in all of anime and all of Japan, which is the cherry blossom, or sakura. And sakura is not, you know, the annoying pink-haired girl from Naruto. We're not talking about her. We are talking about the actual literal flower. So what are cherry blossoms? A lot of people, if you've been watching anime for a while, then you know what they are. But if you are new and maybe you're not sure like what a cherry blossom is, they're pink flowers that bloom on a tree in springtime from late March to early April in Japan. They're usually one of the first trees to bloom in spring. Another main reason that cherry blossoms are so beautiful and like popular and everything is because they last for a really short amount of time. Less than 2 weeks usually. So it's so brief that it just leads to like really deep thoughts of like how brief life is and how beautiful it is, and how sad that it, you know, existence is so short, and mortality and transience and all those amazing, like, you know, big AP literature words that we're gonna throw out in this video. I knew I took AP Lit for a reason. See, this is why, so I can come back and make anime videos. One anime that is literally framed by cherry blossoms is a movie called 5 centimeters per second, which was directed by Makoto Shinkai, who also directed, you know, Your Name, Weathering with You, all those big, you know, romantic blockbuster movies. 5 centimeters per second is a little bit sadder. It talks about like not everyone who thinks they should be together is going to stay together, basically. It really focuses on, you know, connections that don't last. And 5 centimeters per second, like the name of the movie, is literally based off of the time that it takes a cherry blossom like petal to fall to the ground once it's come off of its blossom, which is insane. That's so specific, but it's great. Anyway, you can find cherry blossoms in a majority of various anime, especially slice of life. You know, usually it has something to do with kids starting on the first day of school or people starting a new job. But speaking of things that have a short life and is the second most common symbol on this list, we're going to talk about that right now. But before we do, make sure you like this video if you are enjoying it so far. It really helps me out a lot knowing what kind of content you guys like and if I should keep making more videos like this. I really like videos specifically like this about symbols and like different things you can find in anime. If you can't tell by all the other videos that I make about symbols in anime on this channel. But yeah, let me know that. Like the button. Let's go on into the fifth one, which is fireworks or hanabi. Hanabi literally translates to fire flower in Japan. So there's a lot of flowers on this list, you know. Japan likes flowers. You can see that in all kinds of anime. Yeah, they're just bright explosives that are super popular in Japan as well as in Western culture. In both cultures, fireworks are really popular, especially in summertime. But whereas, you know, in the US, fireworks are really popular in July because of 4th of July. In Japan, fireworks are really popular in August because of Obon. There's a entire festival that is actually dedicated to honoring the dead. And it goes for over a week, and it usually coincides with summer break, with school. And if you see a lot of anime, then you know that whenever a character gets dressed up in yukata, and is gonna go on a date or gonna go out with their friends to a festival, that is usually during summertime. So during these festivals, they have fireworks, and fireworks are usually like the end of the festival, like the ending show, the big finale. Little did you know that fireworks, those beautiful things in the sky that pop up in wherever you live as well as in your favorite anime, actually have a really deep meaning to a lot of the stories that we know and love. A specific story which I think is often associated with flowers, but I specifically saved for this example, is A Silent Voice, which is, you know, one of the best anime movies of all time. They do not only a great job of also showing flower language and hanakotoba and, you know, various connections to flowers, but specifically the fireworks scene in The Silent Voice is probably the most beautiful scene I've ever seen, no pun intended, in an anime, because oh my god, like the connections and like, I don't want to spoil it, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. That scene with Shoko's on the balcony with the fireworks, and fireworks literally meaning like similar to cherry blossoms, like the brevity of life, how short things are, how good things don't last very long, and how just as soon as something beautiful and amazing appears, it could easily be gone in a second. And memories and summertime and youth, usually, because, you know, lots of anime features younger kids going to the festivals and having like creating memories with each other and their friendships. And talking about something a little bit more grounded, literally on the ground, we're going to talk about trains, because trains are they're often shown in anime. And, you know, most of the time trains are shown in anime because things take place in Japan, because it's anime. It makes sense, right? And Japan uses trains a lot. Like, they have lots of trains. They use a lot of public transportation. There's a Shinkansen, which is like a bullet train, which can get you like halfway up the country in like a couple hours. And there's also just regular trains that get people to and fro from home and school and work and all that great stuff. And yeah, so it makes sense that trains are often shown in anime. And trains can usually be more of an aesthetic. I mean, so can fireworks and the flowers and everything that I mentioned as well. But, you know, there can be just there because, you know, it's the natural landscape of Japan is just to have trains. So it makes sense. But there's also a deeper meaning behind trains. Specifically, I want to point out that Spirited Away does a beautiful job of using a train as a great symbol for the ferry to the afterlife, which is like a belief that once you pass away, that there's this giant river that you have to pass over, and, you know, you have to pay the fee and like pass over it on a boat usually. But in Spirited Away, they show the train, and they show the train actually going back and forth kind of between, you know, like the real world and the spirit world, which is like, you know, kind of like the afterlife in Spirited Away. I should make a whole interpretation of Spirited Away because there's so much there. I love the back and forth nature of like the train and like how it has the two ends and what that means for each side, and for, you know, being ferried across the afterlife and being in the spirit world and all that great stuff. trains do not just mean transportation. They have so much more other meanings. And I think another anime that's more recent as well does a great job of this is Akudama Drive, with the whole idea that the Shinkansen, which is the bullet train, is like this godly figure that can't be touched because it literally transports people to this other part of society in that world. So it could also be a reference to, like, you know, another life, the afterlife, a spirit world, and based off things that happen in the place where it takes people to, you probably can make that connection as well. So everything on this list is inherently mostly Japanese. You know, there's trains, which are huge in Japan, there's cherry blossoms, you know, there's a red string of fate, which is rooted in like Eastern culture. There's also a bunch of religious, specifically Christianity and like Catholicism and like biblical references in anime. And it's not that weird, you know, it's not really that strange to see like lots of biblical references in anime or in any literary play or story or whatever, because the Bible is like really global and Christianity is spread across the world for a really long time. So it makes sense that there's just lots of references to it. There's lots of imagery in the Bible that can be used to show lots of deeper meanings and connections about life and passing on and, you know, death and understanding each other and living on Earth with other people, all that deep stuff. So it makes sense that lots of shows use it. Some really popular shows that use biblical references are, Neon Genesis Evangelion is littered with biblical references, and we can argue if those biblical references actually are symbols for, you know, deeper things like hell and heaven and angels and all that, or if they're more of just an aesthetic in another video. And there's also Fullmetal Alchemist, which also has some religious imagery. You know, it talks about alchemy, which is like science and religion mixed together. And of course, there's Death Note, which talks about like temptation and God, and, you know, God's giving humans things to test them and all that. There's just so many references that the Bible has. There's so much imagery that it has that can just be used for a multitude of situations and different ways of portraying stories in anime. So next time you're watching your favorite anime show and you start to do some research on what a particular flower might mean in that show, like for example the wisteria flower in Demon Slayer, make sure you do so safely with NordVPN. With NordVPN, you can protect yourself while you're online using one of the 5,300 plus servers that they have in 59 countries all across the world. Not only that, but you can also travel to these countries to experience the type of streaming content that they have. You can go onto their streaming services and see what other shows are available out there in the world. If you're an anime fan like me, you're probably going to Japan just to make sure that you can catch up on your newest seasons of your favorite shows like Beastars and others. With the ability to use up to 6 different devices with NordVPN, you can make sure that you're protected on all your devices, on every count, while you're watching anime or doing your research or doing whatever you need to do online. So make sure you go check out theanimet/recommendations to find out more about NordVPN. My name is Phoenix. This has been the Anime Tea. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!